actually was good. Should we say that we're going to get started?
Go out there, they'll sit down. They'll stop talking even if they're not seated. Everyone needs to listen. Yeah, go, do it.
Welcome to Texas, y'all. Quick show of hands. How many of you went on the tour of Austin FC's stadium this morning? Oh my gosh. And how many of you had a coffee chat with our presenting sponsor, NextEra Energy? Amazing. This is the 2023 ClimateCAP Summit, and as you can see, it's already well underway. All of us at McCombs are so excited to welcome you all to Austin this weekend. I'm Alexis Greco.
I'm Samantha Hay.
And I'm Patrick McPadden. Thank you for joining us in Texas, a state full of climate contradictions. The history of Texas is largely written in oil and gas. And while some may still see us as just a fossil fuel state, we know that Texas is a lot more than that, and we're always moving forward. The path to combating climate change has to go through Texas. Texas is currently the number one generator of non-hydro renewable energy in the US. In fact, if we were a country, we'd be the 5th largest producer of wind energy in the world. Texas is home to the 2nd most Fortune 500 companies of any state. And in in Houston, in 2021, we saw $15 billion of energy transition capital flow through the city. In Dallas, we have the headquarters of some of the industry leaders for consumer packaged goods, retail, and aviation. All industries that can and must adjust to a world that has a more extreme climate. And this is a global conference, we all know that. We tried to source speakers from all over the world, and still 63% of the people you'll hear from this weekend have ties to Texas. The University of Texas here sits at the intersection of all of this. Students here have the unbelievable opportunity to work with these companies through organizations like Austin Technology Incubator, Longhorn Energy Club, and Clean Tech Fellows. And you may have heard that UT was recently announced to have one of the largest educational endowments in the world, largely due to oil and gas funding. But we also have Dr. John B. Goodenough. And yes, his last name is Goodenough. Dr. Goodenough helped to invent the first lithium-ion battery, and at the age of 100, he still works on this campus trying to find the next big breakthrough in battery tech.
We chose Innovation by Climate as the theme of this year's summit because we wanted to highlight how every industry, existing or emerging, needs to innovate to address the challenges and opportunities presented by climate change. Climate change comes as a consequence of centuries of thinking of the Earth's resources as limitless. And we know that we can't depend on outdated strategies to bring us into the future. We need new industries, new technologies, and new business models if we're going to have an impact for ourselves and for future generations. We're so excited to see this year's summit come to life after 11 months of planning. As you might know, the ClimateCAP Summit was held in 2018 at Duke University's Fuqua School of Business. And today, ClimateCAP represents a partnership of over 30 top MBA programs globally. I know that many of you are here because of your partnership in the ClimateCAP initiative. The initiative continues to be coordinated by Fuqua, with summit host schools rotating each year, and we were thrilled when McCombs was selected to host the 2023 summit. This is a record-breaking year, with historic levels of support from our corporate sponsors, and tickets selling out in less than 2 hours for the biggest ClimateCAP yet. It's clear that student interest continues to grow, and that companies recognize climate change as a critical business issue, requiring new talent, new skills, and new leadership to capitalize on the opportunities presented by this moment. It's also a testament to the dedication and passion of all of you, 300 MBA students here today, that you've chosen to travel here to join us this weekend, despite some flight delays and weather.
Each piece of the 2023 summit, from the content to the operations, has been built with intention. Austin is home to South by Southwest, which has inspired everything from the theme of the conference to session structure. This program was designed to be experiential and hands-on, and this year's summit represents many firsts for ClimateCAP. For one, we're including a live stream option. Hello to everyone tuning in. We've also introduced an off-campus tour in the host city, an innovation showcase with more than 10 startups, multiple hands-on workshops with industry leaders, and the opportunity to see the impacts of climate change through virtual reality. In this auditorium, you'll hear from executives who are leading public company strategy for climate, as well as founders who are disrupting and creating entirely new industries. In the breakouts, you'll first learn about opportunities to address climate impacts across a variety of industries, and then in the next breakout session, you'll learn how to make those solutions into reality. We also made a deliberate choice to weave diversity, equity, and inclusion into each panel and discussion throughout the weekend, rather than a single separate panel, because these topics are so critical to each of us. We're really proud of the people and perspectives you'll hear from this weekend, and we also acknowledge that there's always more we can do to continually weave diversity, equity, and inclusion into our leadership.
Operationally, there were many choices made in the planning of this conference that might not be very clear to you as attendees. We're purchasing verified carbon offsets for all attendee and speaker travel, as well as summit operations. With your help, we can also make this a zero waste event. We sourced all of our meals from UT's sustainable vendor list, and we designed those meals to eliminate single-use items. We have composting bins throughout the building, and all of our snacks are compostable. The decor that you'll see throughout Rolling Hall this weekend was locally sourced and was designed to either be reused after this weekend or recycled. When it comes to the swag that you picked up on the way into the conference, our ethos was less is more. We selected high-quality items that were sustainably sourced and have minimum branding so that you might use them for years to come. We have a regift table out in the lobby. If you don't want anything, you can leave it there rather than send it to a landfill. And if there's anything you're particularly fond of, you can stop by and pick up extras.
There are so many people to thank for making this weekend possible. First, our amazing student planning committee of 22 second-year MBA students who have worked tirelessly over the last year to fundraise, invite speakers, communicate with all of you, secure logistics, and more. And you will see all of that on display throughout the weekend. We are so grateful for all of their commitment, vision, and expertise. And all of them will have an orange ribbon on their name tag so you can see who they are.
We're incredibly grateful to our faculty advisors, Dr. Mita Katari, Managing Director of the Global Sustainability Leadership Institute, and Dr. John Butler, Academic Director of the KBH Energy Center. From day one, Katie Cross and Jessica Wingert and Dan Vermeer, who managed ClimateCAP from the Duke Edge Center, saw our vision for this conference and were with us every single step of the way. It was really amazing. We also would like to thank the staffs of both the MBA program office here at McCombs and the GSLI, along with Dean Lillian Mills and Assistant Dean Tina Mabley.
This event would not be possible without the generosity of our corporate sponsors. Thank you to our presenting sponsor, NextEra Energy. Thank you to our partnering sponsors, KPMG, Beyond Meat, and PwC. Thank you to our collaborating sponsors, AES, HEB, Phillips 66, and Chevron. Thank you to our supporting sponsors, Belcones Resources, Aegon Zender, and Dell. And thank you to our in-kind sponsors, Austin FC, Postmates, Accenture, and HEB.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really.
All of us in this room are going to shape the business world in the coming years. The window to limiting global warming to 1.5 or 2 degrees Celsius is closing, and corporate sustainability commitments are coming due. It's more important than ever that you have a keen understanding of climate leadership from our first roles out of business school all the way to the C-suite. And remember that no matter what your role is, you can enact change. And at the end of the day, this conference is about action. We don't want to just talk about problems. We want to focus on solutions while we're here. We want you to have engaging conversations with other attendees or speakers or sponsors that might change the trajectory of your career. And we challenge each and every one of you to make sure that you find new and tangible skills and action items that you can bring into the industry of your choice.
We need you to make this work. We hope that you will get to put forth your effort and engagement throughout the weekend to create something really special with us. Please don't be a passenger. Sit next to someone new at a breakout session, introduce yourself to our speakers and sponsors, and be an active participant every step of the way. And of course, please don't be a stranger to any McCombs students or staff throughout the weekend. We're really looking forward to connecting with all of you and making you feel at home. We have some great programming lined up, so let's not delay that any longer. Hook 'em, and let's get started. Next, we're thrilled to introduce Dr. Lillian Mills, Dean of the McCombs School of Business and an internationally renowned expert in tax and accounting. Dean Mills, everyone.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the McCombs School of Business for this year's ClimateCAP Summit. I want to thank the Global Sustainability Leadership Institute, the KBH Energy Center, and the McCombs MBA office for all their work, and I'm so glad our student leaders thanked every corporate sponsor. And thank you for the co-chairs, Alexis Greco, Patrick McFadden, Samantha Hia, and faculty members, Dr. Mita Katari and Dr. John Butler. It is such an honor to welcome you to our beautiful campus in Austin. This is very cold for us, city of innovation and entrepreneurship. And the conference is an exciting opportunity for all of you MBAs from across the globe to imagine our future together. And your presence today tells me that you are a generation rising to confront our challenges in the 21st century. This decade calls for business leaders who understand the world is complex with climate risks and implications, and whole industries and investors are poised to confront these previously unforeseen risks and capture the new opportunities. And you're all here because you want to be part of those shifts, to be driving them, not following them. And so welcoming you here is a pleasure. At McCombs, we are human-centered and future-focused. Earlier this week, our namesake, Red McCombs, who was such an energetic and passionate Texas entrepreneur, died. One of Red's sayings was, "There is no such thing as the status quo." And you here today are part of the leaders who live in change, not in status quo. Patrick mentioned that the state of Texas has for a long time been a global energy powerhouse. We're the most oil-rich state in the country, but that's only part of our story. Our prominence in the entire energy sector gives us a front row here to a changing industry, and Texas is a leader in global clean energy now. So the state of Texas leadership in renewable energy is just part of this legacy that in this state, we're scrappy and we adapt to new markets and stay on the cutting edge, innovating solutions that benefit everyone. So whatever the future of business holds, you can be sure that Texas will be there leading the way. And so we're gathering here today to hear from speakers, meet many new companies who are driving emerging industries, and ClimateCAP, the thing you envisioned, is about innovation and investment in that innovation and the implications of climate change on the future of business. It's time to be bold in that space, to show the business world there's a better way of doing things that fosters collaboration within a market economy where there is competition for the best ideas. And what MBA students bring in particular is rational, evidence-based business minds weighing in on energy and climate issues. Students like you can measure and analyze life cycle costs and benefits of the mix of traditional and energy transition technologies and the environmental policies they are subject to. We need that kind of thinking in this space. So it takes vision to realize that when business is done the right way, the innovation prospers the world's economy and everyone can benefit. So I'm just so thrilled to be the dean while Texas is hosting this year's conference to lead us into a world that we haven't imagined yet. At UT, we say what starts here changes the world. That's especially true today. So thank you for being here to be part of this conversation. We're starting off tonight's program with a recorded conversation that I had with Paul Polman, the former CEO of Unilever and author of the critically acclaimed book, Net Positive. And I was thrilled to dive into a conversation with him a few weeks ago. So without further ado, enjoy this conversation and the rest of the conference. And welcome to Texas. Good afternoon. I'm Lillian Mills, Dean of the McCombs School of Business. Thank you for joining ClimateCAP, the annual global summit that brings together MBA students, business leaders, and experts from around the world to assess the implications of climate change for business and investment. It is my pleasure to join in conversation with keynote speaker Paul Polman. Paul is the former CEO of Unilever and co-author of Net Positive, How Courageous Companies Thrive by Giving More Than They Take. Paul works across a range of organizations and initiatives to help speed the global action to regenerate our planet, renew our economies, and unite our societies. He helps business move further and faster on these ambitions, including through his work with Systemique and through mobilizing private equity. Paul sat on the high-level United Nations panel, which developed the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, and co-founded Imagine to drive transformative leadership and partnership. We are so pleased to have Paul share his insights with us today. Welcome, Paul.
Well, thank you, Lillian, for having me. Look forward to it.
Well, let's start with the work you've already done. We have business and business schools and MBAs grappling with sustainability. And your book, Net Positive, says that sustainability is not enough and business leaders need to be net positive. Can you tell us about your work and explain the difference?
Yeah, I'll do that. But first of all, congratulations again with organizing ClimateCAP. It could not be at a more important moment. And doing that via the academic institutions and the business schools, in this case, the McCombs Business School and the University of Texas, is well appreciated. Austin is one of my favorite cities, a little bit of an island in your state, but with a lot of things to offer. So thank you for doing that. The reason we wrote the book, frankly, is to get a mindset change. If I put it very simply, the World Overshoot Day, which is the day that we use more resources than the world can replenish, last year was July 28th, which actually means that after that day, we're stealing from future generations. We're using up resources that aren't there. We're living actually well beyond our means. And yet most companies, at best, are still in what I call the CSR mode, corporate social responsibility. Mm-hmm. If you look at all the sustainability reports that most companies issue, it talks about a little bit less carbon in the atmosphere, a little bit less deforestation in the value chain, a little less plastics in the oceans. But our argument is very simply, when you have overshot these planetary boundaries to such an extent, less bad is still bad. Companies that are going to succeed in the future are companies that are thinking restorative, regenerative, reparative, and this is what the book would argue for. The why is very well understood by most of us now, that the way we currently have our economic system figured out is not really working well for many people, for the planet, for future generations, but they struggle with the how. How do I confer? So this book is a very practical book, written by a practitioner who's run one of the major multinationals and did that in a way of trying to convert the business, but also deliver a 300% shareholder return over the 10 years. And these things are fully compatible. Net positive companies take responsibility of their total impact in the world, all consequences, intended or not. They try to maximize return for all of their stakeholders, not myopically focused on the shareholder alone. They're involved in the broader transformations that society needs. Otherwise, we simply won't get there. And that's what the book is all about.
So, Paul, do you perceive a tension among these stakeholders, the investors versus the consumers, employees, and communities? And how do you manage that tension? How did you do it at Unilever?
Well, the CEOs are actually very well placed to deal with that tension. Many people are talking right now of a poly crisis that we have in this world where many different factors come together. How do you deal with inflation, the geopolitical uncertainty, the pandemic, the climate change aspects that are coming in? So likewise within a business, do I invest in IT or do I open a new factory? Do I enter a new country? Do I invest in the development of our people, where perhaps in 25, 30 years I might create a CEO? So these trade-offs have always been made by business. What we now have to add is probably one of the most important factors is the aspect of the future of humanity. There are new things that have been creeping in, like the planetary boundaries that are affecting all businesses. And so climate change is now on everybody's agenda. The social equity part is now on everybody's agenda, and the discussions around governance have changed drastically as well. So I would say that the best way to deal with that is to run a longer-term business model. If you just myopically run it for the quarters, it's very difficult to optimize. And what we see that most companies then go to the default option, which is the shareholders, which is very regrettable and frankly has proven to be not that successful anymore. So the longer term you run that model, the better it is. Business cannot succeed in societies that fail, nor can they create the jobs or the successful results on a dead planet. So it's in their interest to get involved. And over half the CEOs right now think that their business models will not function anymore 10 years from now if we don't intervene. So the good thing, what increasingly makes it easier, Lillian, is that we've waited so long that we're at the point now where the cost of not acting is actually higher than the cost of acting. So it actually does pay out to get your business models not only focused on the financial returns, but increasingly also on the social and environmental returns.
So, Paul, I'd like to hear your views on the role of governments, regulators versus nonprofits compared to business leaders, because sometimes being a first mover can hurt you. There are free riders in any economic system, and governments require companies and citizens to pay taxes for national defense. They don't rely on citizen donations. In this setting that you're addressing, when would a corporate leader prefer to have their own company-led initiatives versus the government requiring the action to spread it across all participants in the economy?
Well, let me first say, Lillian, that we need all of us. We cannot solve this with any individual party by itself. Someone very wise once said the definition of insanity is to try to do the same things over and over again and expecting different results. We now have global problems of proportions that we've never had before. To tackle the climate change or the inequality or the COVID pandemic, as we have seen, requires the best of all of us. And that's really embedded in the Sustainable Development Goals, these famous 17 goals that were issued at the UN and agreed by 193 countries. in 2015. And they really talk first and foremost about a global partnership, about a global framework, the universality of these issues, the equity, the sustainability, the solidarity, the human rights. And that's probably the most important thing. So for business, you should get involved not only in transforming your own companies and earning a seat at the table, not only expanding that, as we talk in our book, to work in the value chain with your partners, but increasingly to be also involved in ensuring that we have the right regulations. There's a difference between policies and politics. And I think the business should get involved in the policy part of it. When are these issues important? When do they affect our business? When do they affect the future of humanity? And that's obviously a fine line for each company, for each CEO to discuss. But, right now, only 6% of American CEOs show up in Washington. I can understand that. The situation is kind of tense, but that's not healthy. And frankly, we also see when it gets to money in politics or lobbying, that many CEOs say one thing that they stand for as a company, but then use their trade associations to actively lobby the opposite. So this consistency, this positive engagement to get the right frameworks in place is very important. You have enormous pieces of legislation now coming in the US with the CHIPS Act, the Infrastructure Act, the IRA, the requirements that the SEC is now putting into the system. And yet we know that this is better to create a system that works for everybody. We know that most businesses actually think it's better to create an environment for them to continue to thrive. But yet you see this enormous undercurrent of self-interest or lobbying by the short-sighted people that try to derail this progress. And that's not healthy for business, not healthy for humanity.
So the audience that wishes you were here in person is MBAs from all over the country who are quite interested in climate action, but they'll be headed out into a workforce to navigate a citizenry and business community that has still diverse views about what the problems are and what the solutions should be. What kind of leadership skills do they need to develop to navigate that diverse thought?
Well, I think the train has left the station, and increasingly there is evidence that companies that move to this multi-stakeholder, longer-term model, embedding sustainability in the core of their organizations, that they actually also produce a better financial return and have a higher valuation on the stock market. That's why $70 trillion of money has made commitments to decarbonize their portfolios. That's why we have 40 trillion of companies signing up to science-based targets to be in line with the Paris Agreement. That's why we see legislation coming in at an accelerated pace. The train has left the station. Now, I know that there are some people that are in opposition to that want to defend the status quo, or in some cases actually push it back to the point that ESG, or the word ESG itself, is being banned. But some of the states in the US that ban ESG, the employees are asking to still include it in their 401k. I was in Davos, and many of the governors that speak one language in the US were actively courting European companies to invest in their states behind green energy. In other words, the train has left the station. Now, what are the leadership skills that we now need? As we have seen a clear bifurcation in the way companies are being run between the short-term shareholder focus and the long-term multi-stakeholder focus, we've also seen since COVID a clear bifurcation in leadership. Leaders that have shown a certain level of humanity, humility, are more purpose-driven, work in partnerships, think long-term. These leaders actually have shown significantly better results for their companies. Not surprisingly, because they put their employees at ease and they get a higher engagement, or I would argue fulfillment. So these leadership skills are important. We talk about it in the book as courage. Courage to take responsibility of your total impact in the world. Courage to set the targets that are needed, not the targets you can get away with. Courage to work in partnership. So all of that requires a strong sense of purpose, a strong inner core, if you want to, next to the normal outer core that we all need to have. Skills of strategic thinking and investing in R&D and innovation and hiring the right people. These skills will always be there, but the other ones are increasingly becoming more important.
Well, thank you, Paul, for that. And you mentioned innovation, and the theme of our summit this year is the intersection of climate action and innovation. Talk to me some more about what sorts of innovation is needed.
Well, we need all types of innovation, if I may be honest. There are business model innovations that we need. We need the pure technological innovations, but we also need educational innovations, for example, to provide the right resources. You know, we are very close to tipping points on electric vehicles. We're already seeing that on solar and wind. Very soon, with a little bit more work, we can get the hydrogen down to $2 per kilo, which I think is a tipping point that we soon will be seeing. So these are the innovations that we always want. And frankly, in Texas, where you are and where the oil industry is heavily present, it's actually one of the most innovative states. In fact, it's the highest level of renewable investment, and the work that is going on there around hydrogen and other alternative sources of fuel is admirable. And then the second is innovations in business models, to move from a shareholder focused model to a longer term model, to decarbonize, to bring in circularity. All these things require quite a lot of effort. And then last but not least, innovation in the way we create leaders. You know, 70 million people a year take the MBA programs, but unfortunately, the products that come out of that look more like little Milton Friedmans on steroids than these societal leaders that we need right now. And we're paying a high price for that. The tenure of CEOs of major companies has come down to 4.5 years. The length of life of these publicly traded companies has dropped to about 15 years. We simply don't have the right leaders equipped for the challenges that we have today. So making our education truly purpose-driven, putting sustainability not as a side optional course, but in the core of our education is very important. Providing lifelong education and working on your alumni groups so that we can get a faster adaptation of these new leadership styles. And last but not least, working incentives. As long as we do our accreditations don't reflect what we're after, as long as the rankings in schools are based on salaries that you earn, as long as companies that say one thing but continue to recruit in schools and don't and only pay lip service to the environmental and social sides, we won't get there. So the educational transformation is equally important as the business or broader systems transformations that we talked about.
Paul, thank you so much. Here at the University of Texas at Austin, we say what starts here changes the world. And at the McCombs School of Business, we are human-centered and future-focused. And so with this thought-provoking conversation and your path-breaking career, your insights on humanity's greatest and most urgent challenges and our role as business leaders in education have all been inspirational. So thank you for joining us today, and hook 'em horns.
Thank you, Lillian, for the opportunity, and thanks for all you're doing, and above all, be safe. Thank you.
All right.
Hi, everyone. I'm excited to introduce our first keynote speaker, Ron Gonen, and moderator Sonal Shah. Ron is the founder and CEO of Closed Loop Partners, a New York-based investment firm comprised of venture capital, growth equity, private equity, catalytic capital, and an innovation center and operating center focused on building the circular economy. Closed Loop Partners has built an ecosystem that connects entrepreneurs, industry experts, global consumer goods companies, retailers, financial institutions, and municipalities. Prior to Closed Loop Partners, Ron was the Deputy Commissioner of Sanitation, Recycling, and Sustainability in New York City in the Bloomberg administration, and the co-founder and CEO of Recycle Bank. Ron received an MBA from Columbia Business School and served as an adjunct professor at Columbia Business School from 2010 to 2018. On a personal note, Ron has been an inspiration for me and for many of my colleagues as a business leader who has spent his career cultivating businesses that are innovative, profitable, and good stewards of the environment. We're extremely happy to have him with us today. Sonal Shah is the CEO of the Texas Tribune. She has started and led social impact efforts in academia, government, and the private and philanthropic sectors for over 25 years. Previously, she served as interim executive vice president at United Way Worldwide. Sonal founded the Asian American Foundation in Houston and founded and led Georgetown University's Beek Center for Social Impact and Innovation. Her background in government and policy include leading the White House Office of Social Innovation and Civic Participation in the Obama administration, serving as an international economist at the Department of the Treasury, and as policy director for Pete Buttigieg's presidential campaign. In the private sector, Sonal led Goldman Sachs' environmental strategy and Google's global tech and impact investment initiatives. Sonal grew up in Houston, earned a bachelor's in economics from the University of Chicago and a master's in economics from Duke University. Please join me in welcoming Ron Gonen and Sonal Shah to the stage.
Thank you.
Well, hello. That was a very enthusiastic hello out there. I know you're excited because it's the first day of the ClimateCAP conference, right? Excellent. Well, I want to first congratulate and thank Samantha, Patrick, and Alexis for putting on this incredible conference, so congratulations. Now, I know I'm at UT. I know I run the Texas Tribune, but I do have to say hello to my Duke Blue Devils. You are my alma mater, so it's great to, and Ron, it's great to have you here and to have this conversation with you. You know, I started investing in clean tech in 2004 when I was at Goldman Sachs, and at the time, I think everybody at Goldman thought we were crazy. We did our first investments in actually wind and solar in Texas. And they did well, but we also invested in the Chicago Climate Exchange and the European Climate Exchange. They didn't do so well. Yet, what's amazing is to be here at this conference at the McCombs Business School, but with business school students at a time when today this is a very popular conversation. So I was combing through Goldman Sachs trying to find 3 people that would be interested in the conversation, and now here we are. So I would just love to start a little bit with your background, sure, because it is a interesting background as to how you started thinking about this when you were graduating from business school.
Sure.
So tell us a little bit about your history of how you came to climate, the environment, and then a little bit, let's dig into it a little bit.
Sure. Well, great to be here, everybody. It's wonderful to be back in Austin. One of our portfolio companies is Balcones Resources, which does much of the recycling for the city of Austin. So it's always a great opportunity to come here. And I'll touch on a little bit when I discuss my background, how unique of an experience it is to speak at a climate conference and have this type of auditorium and this type of attendance similar to the comments that you just made. But if we go way back, I grew up with a single mom in Philadelphia, had to get a job when I was turning teenage years. And as luck would have it, I got a job working for a family where I would babysit their kids, I'd mow the lawn, I'd fix stuff around the house, basically whatever they needed me to do. This was kind of circa 1988, 89. And as luck would have it, the dad was becoming one of the first green architects in America. At the time, he was in his mid to late 30s, which to me at the time, I was probably 13, seemed to me like an aged, very experienced professional. And he was this well-known architect in Philadelphia at this very prestigious architectural firm. And he had decided to leave the architecture firm and start his own green residential architecture practice. And I remember his dad, who he's very close to, who was an executive in the oil and gas industry, sent him a handwritten letter saying, "What are you doing? Like, you went to Princeton, you got a beautiful wife, you got 2 young kids, you got this amazing architectural career. How are you going to feed your family? Like, you're being totally irresponsible." But I had the good fortune of working for his family and the good fortune of being somebody that he was really interested in talking to about all of these concepts that he was working on. And that was my first introduction to the world of sustainability. He gave me a book called Cradle to Cradle and other books to start reading. And what he was talking about just seemed to make sense. The sun is there every day, providing us energy. Let's use it. And so I had the good fortune of the first thoughts that I had about design and production and business came from him. I didn't have to unlearn a bunch of concepts. That's what I was introduced to. And that's really where my passion came from. Fast forward quickly to just tie up the story about how I got into sustainability. My first part of my career was spent in management consulting. I was at what was at the time Anderson Consulting, now Accenture, and then Deloitte. Great experience for any of you that have been in management consulting or are going into management consulting. In my 20s, it was a great experience. I really learned a lot about business and process and management. But in my late 20s, I realized my real passion is at this intersection between business, maximizing returns, and developing sustainable practices. And I really believe that the way you maximize returns is through sustainable business practices by driving transparency for all stakeholders. And so I left Deloitte and went back to business school at Columbia. And my first day in orientation, it was kind of a room like this where everyone sort of gives a little introduction of who they are and what they're planning to do with their degree from Columbia. So this is 2002 now, a couple years before your story. And it starts off people introducing themselves. And so 2002, this is before the financial crisis, like hedge fund, iBanker, management consulting, hedge fund, inherited my family's business, hedge fund, iBanking. That's what I said. And then it came to me and I said, well, I'm going to build a business focused on sustainable business practices. And it's going to demonstrate that that's how you maximize returns. The silence that you hear now is greater noise than the silence that met me with that comment. And people sort of like looked around and then someone had an epiphany. They were like, Teachers College is over there. They were doing me a favor by explaining that like I had come to the wrong orientation. And I said, no, that's going to be my focus. And there was one class at Columbia Business School at the time on sustainable business practices. It had 9 students in it. Fast forward a little bit, Columbia Business School became the first investor in my first business, which was Recycle Bank. They invested the first $100,000 I ever raised. And from there, I was off with my entrepreneurial career in the sustainability space.
And now you also teach at Columbia.
So in 2010, I was invited to come back to Columbia Business School and launch their first course on entrepreneurship and sustainability. And so it's been really fascinating to see the growth of the sector because went from 2002, where there was really no presence at the school, to fast forward 8 years later, their investment in my first company was very successful financially for them. So that was one data point for them. The other data point was 2010 was right after the financial crisis, and a lot of business schools were trying to think about how do we make sure that we're not continually putting out alumni whose fame to claim is white-collar crime. How do we develop more of an alumni base that provides some social benefit to the world while also making money so they can give back in some way to the university? And there was a lot of this demand amongst the student body as well. And so I was invited to come back and develop that course. And so that was another data point of, hey, now there was like, the course was oversubscribed. I had no teaching experience, it had nothing to do with me. It was because of interest amongst the students. And then fast forward a few years later, a hedge fund manager, philanthropist, decided to endow the school. It's called the Tammer Center for Social Enterprise. And now it's this massive center within the business school, probably the most attended part of the business school. So it's been amazing to see that trajectory and how far we've come. But I will say, for those that are interested in social change, similar to what you've experienced in that conversation in 2004 to where we're at today, progress is a journey. It doesn't happen overnight. You gotta commit and have a sense of urgency while also being patient.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, and there was so much said in the last statement, but I want to just dig into a couple. When you went to business school, you decided to start your own business. So it wasn't that you went in and you were going to go work in a company that was doing sustainability. You actually decided to start your own. What motivated you to become an entrepreneur, and how hard or easy was it to raise your first $100,000?
I think entrepreneurs have a genetic makeup to them. It's something that I've always been interested in, sort of being my own boss and developing solutions. I've always thought of solutions to problems differently than my classmates or my friends. And so I think I was always inclined to pursue that professional path. That being said, one thing that I would encourage everyone to do is, a big part of the success I've had in my entrepreneurial career was because of those years I spent in my 20s at Anderson Consulting and then at Deloitte, because it gave me a really important foundation in business process and management and software development that were really critical to taking the ideas that I had as an entrepreneur and making them a reality. So in terms of becoming a entrepreneur post-business school, that's what I really went to do. And fortunately, the first few weeks of business school, a friend of mine from high school said, "Hey, I have this idea. Would it be possible to reward people for recycling if you could record that they had recycled and how much they recycled?" And I said, yes. And back to my comment about first part of my career, I can build the software and the process to actually do that. And that became the seed for my first venture that I co-founded and was the CEO of Recycle Bank. In terms of raising capital, that's been an interesting journey. That first $100,000 that I raised from Columbia, they have a fund that invests in student-run businesses. This is now, I got that in 2003, 2004, so that's 20 years ago that I got that first $100,000 in funding. Now, I've been fortunate that over the last 20 years, I've raised over $1 billion for funds and different ventures. But of the billion, nothing is more important than that first 100,000. I remember, as it was yesterday, exactly where I was standing in New York when I got a call from Cliff Shore from the Lang Fund to tell me that Columbia had invested $100,000 in Recycle Bank. And my initial emotion was, I'm about to graduate with an MBA from Columbia, and they invested $100,000 in my business. I was overcome with this emotion of like, I've made it. I've literally made it. I came from like single mom in Philly, no money, to like, I've made it. And then it dawned on me, wait, I got $150,000 in school loans. How's that ledger work? But that in all seriousness was the most important investment that I've gotten. And the most important lesson that I've learned from that 100,000 to that $1 billion plus is it's all about people. You got to be really careful when you're raising money to make sure that you're raising it from people who are mission aligned with what you're trying to accomplish with your business, what you're trying to accomplish in life, and share a similar integrity about how to go about life. And that's been the biggest lesson that I've learned. And I've got a lot of scars from that 100,000 to that billion. But each one of those scars, I could probably tell you 10 stories about how I've been able to help somebody in their career by saying, like, don't do that, or like, go in that direction.
Yeah, that's great. That's good to know. And it's a good reminder, I think, for those of you that are looking at starting businesses. know who you're taking your money from, because that alignment matters a lot. So you then, after you sold your company, went into government. And so what sort of prompted going into the Bloomberg administration and participating in city government?
I'd always been interested in social policy and government. I never really saw a path to what I might do in government. I think at that stage I thought that the only participation I could ever have in government would be as some elected official, but I didn't really see that in part of that period of my life. But I've always been interested in politics and social policy, obviously as an entrepreneur interested in sustainability. And again, a fortuitous situation happened where Mayor Bloomberg had a deputy mayor, Cass Holloway, and a head of sustainability, Rit Argawala, who's now the first, he's back in government, he's now the first chief climate officer for New York City and head of New York City DEP. But Cass, deputy mayor, and Rit were looking around at New York City's system and realized that the city was spending $400 million to export waste to out-of-state landfills annually. And the infrastructure that the city had built to export that waste was billions of dollars. And every time they would ask the sanitation department about increasing recycling, it'd either be like, recycling doesn't work, it'd cost too much money, and they would say, cost too much money? Like more than $400 million a year? And it was like, well, yeah, you know, like it costs a lot of money. It was like, we're not getting the right answer here. And so they were looking for someone who is entrepreneurial, because that's the way the mayor thought about solutions, who also had experience in the waste and recycling industry to come in and effectively reimagine New York City Sanitation Department with a focus on sustainability. And I oftentimes describe myself as I was like the compromise candidate, where the mayor was getting a lot of pressure from environmental groups around the city's record around recycling. And so they knew that they needed to appoint somebody who the environmental community would view as very progressive, was in line with them on environmental initiatives. But this person could not be successful unless the garbage guys, and this was an old school agency I was coming into. The sanitation commissioner at the time, and I came in and we sort of split the agency. He kept garbage, I took over recycling and other things. He celebrated his 50th year at the agency when I joined. Okay, there were people that I met that had been there 40 years, and he had been there 10 years and was their boss when they first joined. And so in some respects, it was an incredibly run organization, and I learned a lot from John Doherty, the commissioner at the time. And in another sense, it was very much behind the times. And so they were looking for somebody who could also work with the garbage guys, and the garbage guys would respect. And because I'd founded Recycle Bank, and I had patents on hydraulics and RFID in the industry, and I'd ridden on the back of trucks and picked up garbage, I was a known entity to them. And they felt like I'd be accepted by them. And so I always sort of called myself the compromise candidate that the environmentalists were happy about, and like the old school Italian and Irish sanitation guys were like, oh yeah, totally. And so that's how I ended up in government. They recruited me to come in and take on this role.
Well, and you left and you started Closed Loop Partners. Tell us a little bit about how you define circular economy, and then how you came about building Closed Loop Partners.
I define the circular economy as manufacturing without a reliance on natural resource extraction or a reliance on disposal in landfill. You're effectively manufacturing in the most cost-effective and efficient way possible, because you're either using material science for new types of materials, or you're just continually recycling and reusing products, and there's never a need for landfill. You're just continually reusing that material. So that's the way we define circular economy. One of the greatest economic scams ever perpetrated was the extractive industries and the landfill industries making us believe that garbage is free. Recycling If you do it, you're a good person. You should try to do it. I know it's not convenient. It does cost money. We'd like you to try to do it. If you don't do it, it's okay because garbage is free. It's one of the greatest scams of all time. Garbage is not free. Garbage costs money to the tune of billions of dollars of taxpayer money that's spent every year to stick valuable commodities in a hole. Who else benefits from sticking valuable commodities in a hole? The extractive industries. Because if you're sticking valuable commodities in a hole, the next set of products you need to manufacture, you got to go extract more natural resources to manufacture them. And so we effectively, post-World War II, built an economy that was gamed for extractive resources and landfills. It had nothing to do with capitalism, had nothing to do with competition. It had to do with certain special interest gaming the system. And so part of our goal, from a purely financial standpoint, like I'm a devout environmentalist, but purely financial standpoint, is if you can develop a circular economy, you're going to significantly reduce costs for consumer goods companies and retailers. The LPs in our funds include the world's largest retailers and consumer goods companies. We manage money for Walmart, Amazon, PepsiCo, Coca-Cola, Unilever, P&G, Nestle, Microsoft, so on and so forth. And you're going to help municipalities save money as well. I'll use Austin as an example. How far is the landfill that Austin sends its garbage to? Does anybody know? Not that you should know this, but interesting to know if anybody knows. Okay, it's about 40 miles away. So you pick up garbage in Austin, you're going to drive that truck 40 miles, you drive that truck back 40 miles. That's 80 miles that garbage has to travel. Now, if that garbage is just garbage, fine, but if that garbage has PET plastic in it that's valuable, aluminum, cardboard, that could go someplace else, which is our recycling facility. Where's our recycling facility? Our recycling facility is 15 miles from here. That means that every time a piece of cardboard, a piece of plastic, a piece of aluminum gets put in the garbage container in Austin, it's going to travel an additional 25 miles to the landfill and 25 miles back, 50 miles round trip in Austin traffic. That's a cost that you as the taxpayer in Austin have to cover. My guess is this is the first time you're hearing that economic story. There's a reason for that. And solving for that is where we see huge value in the circular economy.
And so what kinds of businesses are you invested in closed loop?
Sure. So we invest across asset classes. So we have a venture fund, we have a growth equity fund, we have a credit fund, and then we have a private equity fund. So I'll give you quick examples in all of those. On the venture side, I'll give you an example on the material science side of things. So we have a company out of MIT called Mori. It's created a MORI. It's created a odorless, tasteless, edible silk protein that you can spray on fruits, vegetables, and meats that creates an oxidization barrier. It eliminates spoilage. Through material science, we can get rid of a lot of plastic that today is hard to recycle, which is the film plastic. And even if we can find recycling markets for it, it's just things we don't need. We can innovate out of it through material science. So that's an example on the material science side. We have a company called Home Biogas, which is the first household-size anaerobic digester. Anaerobic digesters convert food waste into gas. Generally, you'll see anaerobic digesters as large municipal $100 to $250 million type facilities. Home Biogas has miniaturized that technology. Think solar farm versus solar on a rooftop, where you can now just put an anaerobic digester in your home or in a restaurant and convert your food waste on site into gas. So that's an example of some great innovation that we've invested in. On the other end of the spectrum, 4 years ago, we bought Balcones Resources, which is the recycling company that does most of the recycling for the city of Austin. So that's a typical example of a private equity type investment.
So from being an entrepreneur to now running Closed Loop Partners, what has surprised you the most?
I would say the thing that surprised me most that continues to be reinforced is the importance of surrounding myself and organizations with the right people. It's something that I had always heard about in college and kind of heard about in business school, but until you run your own business or your own large division, it doesn't, I think, fully hit you. And it doesn't necessarily surprise me anymore, but it's continually reinforced that in a leadership role, the majority of my time actually needs to be spent thinking about the people in my organization and how they're interacting. And the way my mind works is I'm always trending towards trying to solve problems and build new systems. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm not somebody who's necessarily going to sit down and start thinking about people and culture. And so it's something that I have to be very disciplined about so I don't get surprised.
Yeah. While I haven't been on the business side, I will say building culture is something that as an entrepreneur, from an entrepreneurial perspective, it's not the thing you're taught, but it's probably one of the more important things as you grow.
Yeah. So if I could say one thing about that as well is one session that I would teach in my business school course is I would start the class off and say, you're in your second semester of your second year in business school. You're graduating from a top business school as you guys are. And unfortunately, I need to share with you that you were not given the opportunity to take the two most important classes that you're going to need as a business leader. And my class was for entrepreneurs. People are like, what are you talking about? Oh, Sales 101 and HR 101. And unfortunately, most top-tier business schools view those two courses as kind of beneath a Tier 1 MBA. Like, we don't do sales. Like, we don't knock on people's doors and do sales. And HR, that's like, there's other departments at the university that teach HR. We don't do HR. We might do a course on leading and management. Every business school has that, but like HR, probably not. But if you're going to be an entrepreneur, if you're going to be a CEO, if you're going to be a business leader, the two most important courses or skill sets that you need are sales and HR. And we could do a better job of really teaching those, because I think most MBAs come out and they have to kind of learn those skills on the job, which is a hard way to learn those skills. And they'd be better off having had the opportunity to learn about those skills, best practices, gain a network within the business school, and then go out and be leaders with that skill set.
I will tell you, it's not just in business. It's also in the nonprofit sector. I think I spend 50% of my time on HR and sales. So we are at a business school conference. You have students here, both. How many of you are first years? How many of you are second years? We have a pretty good, decent sized audience here, both first and second years. What advice do you give to students? Let's start with first year. As you're thinking about jobs you're going to take in your first year, what are the if you care about climate, if you care about the circular economy, what's the advice you would give to students?
The world 10 to 20 years from now, when most of you will be in your late 30s to late 40s, entering the prime of your career, is going to be different than the opportunities that exist today. So go in with a open mind and a passion that you want to pursue, or an interest in trying to find that passion. And when people tell you, oh, that market is small, don't go there, or there's not a lot of opportunity there, don't go there, be very careful around that person. That's terrible advice. And I used to show this graph where going back 1950, 1960, 1970, all the way to present day, of the 10 largest companies in New York State. And New York State, similar to Texas, New York State's probably the 15th largest economy in the world. But every 10 years, the turnover of the 10 largest companies in New York State is about 50%. Okay? And that's a great thing about the U.S. economy. There's tremendous innovation, new markets develop, and it doesn't mean that those companies that aren't in the top 10 anymore went bankrupt or failed. They may just be the 17th largest company instead of the 4th largest company. So they still might be viable businesses doing well, probably are. The point is that a different business emerged to come into that. And the thing that you can take away from that is the great thing about the American economy is it's constantly innovating and constantly changing. It doesn't stay the same. And in fact, for it to stay the same, for us to keep the status quo, would be one of the most anti-capitalist thing that somebody could want or pursue. And oftentimes you have these entrenched interests who kind of call themselves capitalists that don't want to see things change because they want to keep the honeypot for themselves. So if you're a first-year student, whatever that passion is you have, the probability of it actually being very valuable 10 or 20 years from now is greater than the probability of you saying, oh, I'm not going to pursue that passion. I'm going to go do this that everyone's telling me to do because that's going to be where I'm going to make money. It sounds counterintuitive, but if you go down the route of probability, just follow your passion. And if your passion was wrong, you still did the right thing because you lived the life that was meant for you, and you'll figure out that next thing. For the second year students, I'd say get ready to work hard. It's a beautiful world out there. It really is. It's a beautiful world out there, but it's also a big bad competitive world out there. And Mark Twain has a great quote. The world was here first. It doesn't owe you anything. And I've witnessed this post-COVID in the hybrid I want to work from home phenomenon, where I've seen recent MBA grads that they're in the office at 8 a.m. and they're there every day. And I've seen MBAs who are like, what's the hybrid work? I'm gonna be from home, and can I do and then the economy started to crash, and the person that was in the office at 8 a.m. is still in the office at 8 a.m. And the person was like, what can you do for me? What's your hybrid policy going to be? And why should, it's like, I hope they're doing well. They're really nice people. But that's the reality of the world. And just get ready to work hard. Get out there and work hard and make that life for yourself.
So I'm going to go to questions in just a minute. So get ready for your questions. One last question for you. For those that want to become entrepreneurs as they're leaving business school, what's your advice?
Entrepreneurship is so hard and so beautiful. It has to be something that's inside of you from a perspective that there's nothing else you could be doing with your life. And I've had students who come to me and they say, I have this business idea, but I've got this offer from McKinsey. And I go, take the job at McKinsey. And they go, but wait, I didn't tell you my idea yet. I go, the idea doesn't matter. if you would even consider doing something else, you should go do that. And that's okay. Like, those are really good jobs. But entrepreneurship is going to be so hard that you don't want to be considering, oh, I could have done that. Or what if I did that? Oh, I can't. Like, it's not going to work. So if you know that this is for you, go do it. And you'll know that it's for you. If you're not sure, probably find something else. And that's good too. Like, the airline industry only works because there were entrepreneurs and innovators who figured out how to get a tube off the ground and carry 300 people at 300 miles an hour. But the airline industry as a business only works because someone said, I'm only doing that if there's a seatbelt. So, someone's got to come up with the seatbelt and manufacture the seatbelts and come up with mechanics and make sure that there's a process in place where the planes are safe and so on and so forth. In industry, we need many different types of people in order for that industry to be successful. As an entrepreneur, I need many different types of people around me to help me be successful. And I've been fortunate to build a team around myself over my career that when I have an idea, we work together as a team to make that a reality. That's the best way I can answer that question.
No, I mean, I think important to always know that everybody has a role to play in a business, and it's not everybody needs to be an entrepreneur.
Everybody has a role to play, and they're all equally important. I mean, we glamorize the entrepreneur, but there's a lot of hard work behind that. So we tend to glamorize the entrepreneur because it's an easy story to tell. But the success of ideas and organizations, there's multiple people of equal importance making that a reality.
Questions? All right, can we start right here in the front?
Hello, thank you for your time. You mentioned that you feel that in the next 10 years, the sectors that are sort of fashionable and in vogue today will be quite different then. And so my question is, within sort of the sustainable energy and circular economy space, what are your thoughts about what the upcoming sectors are? And then as a follow-up, do you have any specific startups or companies in that space that you personally admire?
Sure.
So can I ask just one question? Can you give us your name and which school?
My name is Serena, and I'm from Chicago Booth.
Okay, great. Love the spirit. I think that small-scale distributed energy production, as well as manufacturing, I think the next 10 to 20 years, that's going to be a major sector. I think there's a lot of value to offshore wind. I'm a big supporter. I think there's a lot of value to solar farms. I'm a big supporter. But if you look at the cost and efficiency of generating energy and then having it traverse long distances, and along those distances, there's all types of things that can happen to cut that energy supply, whether it be environmental or political or different types of attacks, versus technologies that can enable you to, on-site, generate energy, whether it be wind, whether it be solar, whether it be anaerobic digestion. And I'll throw something else in there, which doesn't get enough discussion, energy efficiency. There's way more opportunity in the United States to make buildings more energy efficient than there is to produce renewable energy for those businesses as a first step. And on the manufacturing side, as it relates to circular economy, and this is really the genesis of Closed Loop Partners, is the supply chains that we've been operating under were developed in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. That concept of I'm going to harvest cotton in Egypt in quasi-slave labor. I'm going to send that cotton over to Malaysia because transportation is really cheap, to quasi-slave labor, and have them make it into a fabric. I'm then going to send it to someplace in Latin America where it's not quasi-slave labor, but it's really cheap, and they're going to make the cloth there, and then they're going to send it to the U.S. Market. In the 50s, 60s, and 70s, putting aside the social and environmental harm of that, it actually made economic sense. Today, it actually doesn't make economic sense anymore. Labor costs have gone up. You can't keep people in quasi-slavery anymore. You now have tools that can actually show the customer, hey, this is what's going on in terms of where things are being manufactured. I mean, when just 20 years ago, not 50 years ago, but 20 years ago, you want to do a story about somebody dumping chemicals in a river in India? I mean, you got to send a reporter there. You got to write the story. They got to try to, get a picture, get it back to their editor. Today, it's on a smartphone. It doesn't make economic sense anymore. And through material science, through better manufacturing, through recycling, the state of Texas, whatever comes into the state of Texas as a product, should effectively stay in the state of Texas and just be remanufactured into that same product. So local manufacturing, local energy production, I see as a major opportunity.
Good question. Got one back there.
Hi, thank you for sharing, Ron. My name is John. I'm from McCombs. So I have a question that I would like to know how you see the AI interacts with the circular economy and how you see that maybe the circular economy adopts AI. And do we have an eye on any startups related to the combination of the two? Thank you.
About 7 years ago, we saw the introduction of robotics and AI into the recycling industry. We were actually the seed investor in the first company in the space called AMP Robotics. We've since also invested in other robotics and AI technology. And so I think in the recycling industry, there's tremendous opportunity when it comes to AI and robotics, but especially AI to identify everything that's coming into the facility and where it came from. And that type of information is valuable to multiple stakeholders. So that's one area where I see AI being really valuable. The other place where I see AI being really valuable is from a design of product standpoint, to help designers understand what's worked in the past, what might work in different cultures, different types of materials to think about that enables them to design smarter and design faster.
All right, I'm just going to see if there's anybody at the top before I... Nope. All right, right here in the front, please.
Hi, Ron.
Hello.
Is this thing on? Okay. Hi, I'm Johanna. I'm a dual degree student between Duke and UNC. So I'd love to know a little bit about your thoughts on monomaterials. I feel like a lot of us first encounter the problem of waste and recycling when we eat our yogurt and realize that it's got a 5 in the little triangle, and so that as much as we want to rinse it, we can't actually recycle it. And so I know there's a lot of incentives on the part of plastic makers to make a variety of plastics that are all kinds of levels of durability, but that obviously makes it increasingly difficult to streamline the reduction of all of those different waste streams. So I'm not sure if you're seeing any trends towards the direction of making smaller varieties of plastics, because that would simplify so much, but just any perspective you have on that.
Yeah, great question. Monomaterial design is really critical to the success of circularity. What we'll oftentimes see in products is a mixture of different types of materials, and the cost of separating out all those different materials is greater than the value that the markets will pay for those materials. So those materials on a one-off may have markets and have value, but separating them is a challenge. And if I can tell a quick story about the inefficiency that exists in the market today. I live in New York City. We have some of the best design schools in the world. And I'll oftentimes get invited to come speak to a master's in product design class. These are all people getting ready to go to Danone or Nestle or P&G. And most people in design schools in New York City would identify themselves as very progressive, care deeply about the environment. And I'll ask the students, tell me if you care deeply about circularity. And they're like, oh yeah, this is what I want to do. I go, well, how many of you have visited a MRF? So everybody looks around like, I don't know, what's a MRF? A MRF is a recycling industry. It's a materials recovery facility. Okay, so we own Balcones Resources. That's the MRF that services Austin. They've never visited a MRF. So how could they possibly design for circularity or recyclability if they've ever actually been to a recycling facility? And oftentimes they'll say like, oh, well, where are one of those? Like, we'd love to visit. I'm like, well, the largest and most sophisticated one in the United States is in Sunset Park, Brooklyn, about 20 minutes from here. It's like, oh, well, we were never exposed to that. So that's one thing that has to change in design schools is they need to get in touch with the companies that are responsible for getting that material and understand the complexities. People in design schools will often show me, like, here's this, glass jar with aluminum lid, plastic, it's all, and I'm like, how am I going to separate that? Now, on the other end of the spectrum, recycling companies, they have no idea who the top design schools are. There's a paper recycling company and box company called Pratt Industries, really good company. There's also a world-class design school called Pratt. When I talk to people in the recycling industry and I say, okay, you guys are always complaining about these new products that come into the market, why don't you go, give a lecture at Pratt? They're like, I was just at Pratt yesterday. I'm like, no, not that Pratt. I'm talking about Pratt the school. They're like, why did Pratt start a school? I'm like, no, guys, it has no affiliation. It's completely different. So there's also responsibility on the side of the recycling industry to reach into the design schools. And for those of you who are interested in fashion, it's the same thing, like a mixture of polyester and cotton blend. We're in the power recycling industry, but I got nothing to do with that. If you give me polyester, I can do something with polyester. If you give me cotton, I can do something with cotton. If you give me a polyester cotton blend, there is a technology to separate it out. Very expensive.
Well, we're out of time. So I wanted to say thank you to all of you. I know this is the beginning of the conference, so super excited that there are a group of students looking at climate and wealth and the opportunity in the climate space to really think about new businesses. But I just want to repeat what Ron said earlier. I think that what you see today and what you will see in 20 years will not be the same. So as you all are looking at your career, please keep that in mind because there's a lot of opportunity and many of you will be coming up with some of those opportunities, whether it's within a company or whether it's entrepreneurs or other ways. But thank you for having us here. Ron, thank you for this. This was such a great conversation. And good luck for the rest of the conference.
Thanks, guys.
The energy industry, excuse me, everyone. We're going to get started with our next panel. We're a couple minutes behind, so we're going to try to move quickly. The energy industry is one of constant transformation and innovation. Few people understand this better than our next keynote speaker, Rebecca Kujawa, and our moderator, Dr. Michael Weber. Rebecca Kujawa is the President and Chief Executive Officer of NextEra Energy Resources. NextEra Energy Resources is the world's largest generator of renewable energy from wind and sun and a world leader in battery storage. With over 24,000 megawatts of total net generating capacity, primarily in 38 states and Canada, Ms. Kujawa is also president and a member of the board of directors of NextEra Energy Partners, a growth-oriented limited partnership formed by NextEra Energy to acquire, manage, and own contracted clean energy projects. Ms. Kujawa joined NextEra Energy in 2007 in NextEra Energy Marketing and has held various business and finance roles since, including Executive Vice President of Finance and Chief Financial Officer of NextEra Energy. Prior to joining NextEra Energy Resources, Ms. Kujawa served as Senior Vice President of Equity Research at Stanford Group Company and began her career in as an equity derivatives analyst at Goldman Sachs. Ms. Kujawa holds the Chartered Financial Analyst designation and a Bachelor of Arts degree in Public Policy Studies from Duke University, where she graduated with honors. Dr. Michael Weber is the Josie Centennial Professor in Energy Resources, an author, an entrepreneur, and a professor of mechanical engineering here at the University of Texas. Dr. Weber is the CTO of Energy Impact Partners, a $3 billion $3 billion clean tech venture fund. He is also one of the originators of Pecan Street Incorporated, an Austin-based organization running the nation's largest scale smart grid and smart water experiment. He's worked at RAND Corporation and recently served as the Chief Science and Technology Officer at ENGIE in Paris, France. Through all this, Dr. Weber hosts a monthly meetup of students, professors, and working professionals in the energy space here in Austin, which is lovingly referred to as clean energy beers, at least unofficially, to those who attend. Through his professional work and community engagements, Dr. Weber is perhaps best known as a connector of people and ideas in the energy arena. Dr. Weber holds both a BS and a BA from UT Austin, making him a double Longhorn, as well as an MS and PhD in mechanical engineering from Stanford University. Without any further delay, please help me in welcoming Rebecca Kujawa and Dr. Michael Weber.
Well, good evening. It's good to see you here. I hope the mic is on, and really happy to have such a convening of people on these great topics. And Rebecca, great to meet you and to have you as part of this conversation. You've got a very interesting background, so I wonder if you could start telling us a little bit about your story, your path to where you are now, and then what you're doing now in that role. So just share some of your story with the students and the audience.
Well, thank you very much, Michael, and I'm so thrilled to be here amongst all of you all. And as we talk about the future of energy and the transformation that we are all undertaking, it couldn't be more heartening to me to be in a room filled with you all who are clearly so motivated, so focused on this. And I think that fact alone is a sign of how bright our future really is. So I'm very happy to be here with you. So my background is probably a little bit unusual for our industry. I remember when I joined our company 16 years ago, which is about 10 years into my career. My dad was counseling me at the time and said, dear daughter, I know you pretty well. You really like innovation. You really like to move fast. You really like to be analytical. Why in the world would you go to a utility? You, dear daughter, are not going to be happy. And I am thrilled to say that he couldn't have been more wrong. And I think what he didn't see, many of us didn't see 16 years ago, is what was happening in our space. And what was happening in the changing business models, the changing technologies, the ability to continue to innovate and keep getting better at what we do. So I joined our company 16 years ago. I joined in a marketing and trading function, which was really fortunate for me because I was a career changer. And I had been in financial-oriented roles before that, so it was probably the environment I'd be most comfortable joining. And it was particularly valuable for me because I literally didn't know a thing about energy. I didn't even know that there was such thing as a regulated utility and a competitive or a deregulated market. It was that little.
But then you enter the trading floor? That's right in the lion's den for that, right?
Yeah, exactly. Super smart. Now you know why my dad was counseling me. Right. So it was terrific for me because I think about things in terms of dollars and cents. You obviously heard in the bio I ended up becoming the chief financial officer, so it's kind of an indication of the way I think about things. The markets are really helpful in trying to figure out some of the different values in the energy markets. So there's a different value for capacity versus a different value for energy, different value for ancillary services. So when you get involved in the markets, you start to see why there's a different value to it and think about it a little bit differently. After a couple years in those types of roles, I was asked to go to our investor relations department. So if you ask me, like, what are some of the career recommendations I would make for you, it would be take the calls and make sure you listen when someone, especially those that care about you, offer you a new opportunity. It was one I definitely didn't want. So prior to joining the company, I'd worked for 10 years in finance as a sell-side equity analyst, had worked for a couple of startup technology companies, and then joined our company. And I didn't want to be in finance. I didn't want to be talking about what other people were doing. I wanted to do. Fortunately, I listened and I took the job and fell in love with being able to know more about our company at a higher level. After a couple years of doing that, I joined what we call business management. Business management was really, I ended up being responsible from
You sound defensive, but
I know.
like business management. Okay,
totally
yeah.
defensive.
Yeah.
No, it runs the P&L of all of our generating fleet. So we are one of the largest generators of renewable energy. So that's a great place to learn about our business. And then was offered to become chief financial officer. I like numbers. It was very comfortable. And then about a year ago, got to be our chief executive officer and run our NextEra Energy Resources business. So quite a twisted turning path, and one where I wouldn't change anything, and glad I've had these experiences.
And there might have been some randomness, but looking back, probably each piece or each step gave you some information or knowledge you wouldn't have gotten otherwise that makes you better today, I guess. Is that correct?
For sure.
Yeah.
I worked for startup software companies. I actually was calling on people and trying to figure out how to sell to them. Which is great experience. Some of those early jobs on the trading floor, I spent a lot of time in Excel. Yeah. Now, you can really gloss over what the value is of spending a lot of time in Excel. But after you've done it, you look back and what you learn from that is like really thinking about numbers and putting together big data sets, putting together models so you can see how levers work.
And gaining some intuition around the numbers as
Absolutely.
well, I guess. I'm sure faculty here nodding along, yes, go back to your Excel spreadsheets. It's great.
Love Excel.
But I think sometimes if you're a student looking forward, you hope for an elegant path, but sometimes it's not elegant, sometimes it's hopping around. But it seems to me like all experience is good experience and helps set you up for success.
I totally subscribe to that. And I think a huge differentiator for those that ultimately have a growing and successful path is one, adaptation, but two, a frame of mind. Like if you embrace the fact there's a lot to learn in Excel, you're going to learn a lot more in Excel.
Yeah, maybe being flexible, coachable, other things, which I'm sure you were. That's great. What a great story, and I think there are other people might take some inspiration from your path as well. There's a lot happening. Energy's changing a lot. I would like to say that the history of energy is one of change, so that's the only constant of energy that's always changing. Yet there are episodes where it seems to change faster than other decades. And it feels like we're maybe, I don't know, a few years or a decade into like a 3-decade transition or something. I don't know, I'm kind of making that up. But it feels like things are moving faster. So given what's happening in the swirl of energy, what's exciting to you? Like, what are the things that you're most interested in, given everything that's happening?
I couldn't be more excited about where we stand today. And in my 16 years, and I'll abstract back, we got a lot of folks in our company that have worked there for 30 years. I would say, hands down, this is the most exciting time in our industry, and the most rapid pace of change. Even we, a couple of years ago, and we talked about this earlier, we're not thinking a lot about green hydrogen. Mm-hmm. We really were not expecting substantial extension of incentives for renewables. And the combination of those two truly is transformational. So we, as the largest renewables company, for years have been riding the boom and bust cycle of production tax credits and investment tax credits, never knowing when renewable costs would actually go up. Now we have literally decades of visibility to low-cost renewables. That totally changes the way that we think and run our business. It totally changes what's possible.
Policy stability in a long-lived asset industry makes a huge difference,
important.
Right? Yeah, that's
so
great.
Now we're talking about how do we 3x our company in less than a decade. That, and by the way, we're the largest renewables company in the world, largest market cap here in the U.S. by like 2x. And so to say that we're going to 3x our company is a very big ambition, but it's totally foreseeable.
Go back to like the rise of the internet or tech to see that kind of growth in over a decade. And so this is what it feels like to me. And I was in the Bay Area from 1995 to 2000 for grad school when the internet came to life. And it felt like that was the center of the world and everything was changing. It feels like that again, frankly. I don't know if you get the same kind of feeling.
I totally agree.
So there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of upward rise. So you told us a little bit about you, things you're excited about. Tell us about the company. Like, what is the company doing? What is your footprint? You gave a hint at it already. You're a renewables company, but you're more than that. So where are you active? What are you doing? What are the types of things in your footprint, your range of activities?
Perfect. I think that's a great way to frame up one of the things that I was going to mention a minute ago, which is we have a real zero ambition as a company. So not net zero, that we're going to get to zero carbon emissions through offsets or other type of methods, but we really want to emit zero carbon by 2045.
So by 2045, which is faster, because some people say 2050 or 2080, but you're saying 2045.
2045, and as the world's leading renewables company, we actually are one of the slower adopters of having a target that ambitious. Many people have announced a net zero target, did it far before we did, but we wanted to see a real path to real zero. And with everything that we see today, both from an incentive standpoint and technology and innovation, the pace of change, we see that is really possible in a way that we wouldn't have thought so a couple of years ago.
And I guess your customers are asking for it as well, or your shareholders, or it's not just the incentives that do it. Like there's more to it than that.
Oh, it's great business. It's great business, great economics, great for the environment, great for our customers, great for our stakeholders.
And can you talk about your assets? You say renewables, but you also have gas pipelines. You have a mix of things, because that will tie into the role of hydrogen, for example. So can you tell us a little bit more about the range of activities that you have?
Yep. Within the energy resources portfolio, we are essentially an all of the above type energy company. Okay. So we are the world's leader in renewables. That's both from the wind and sun, a global leader in battery storage. We also invest in the leading competitive transmission company, so building the wires to convey all of this energy from where it's produced to where it's consumed. And then we do actually produce natural gas and oil today. That has been instrumental in our learning about what's going on in the marketplace, economics, establishing relationships now that are critical as we think about the green hydrogen markets to come. And we are just on the cusp of an explosion, and I shouldn't use explosion in hydrogen.
Rapid growth.
Rapid growth.
Rapid growth
in green hydrogen.
Accelerating market adoption.
There we go.
Yeah, exactly.
Sounds far less exciting, but probably a much better choice of words.
Yeah.
Like an enormous opportunity set for green hydrogen. We alone, and we're a really big company, but we alone see $25 billion worth of investment opportunity in the next couple of years. And we, as a company, are investing about $100 billion over the next 4 years, largely.
$100 billion in 4 years. Those are big numbers, right?
Now, I used to be the CFO, so technically the high end is $95 billion. So I feel like I need to say that, but nearly $100 billion, which is a crazy amount, but not crazy when you think about seeing the things like green hydrogen, where these facilities are enormous.
That's real capital being deployed at a rapid clip, which means a lot of jobs, a lot of expansion, a lot of opportunity. You'll have to have a lot of innovation, and also you'll be a lot of repetition and learning from that.
Absolutely.
That will improve reliability or improve the capability. So I think that's pretty exciting. And you're one of the leaders, but you're not the only one. So it's happening elsewhere. So there's just like this big wave, and then hopefully you can maintain your leadership position on this wave as well.
I'm counting on it.
Yeah, that's the thing.
I'm counting on it. And with 3x the growth and a lot of capital, we are able to do things that many other companies can't because they don't have the platform to leverage these types of investments. Over the last decade, we have invested substantially in data analytics, modeling capabilities. We like to say artificial intelligence, but I'll be honest, it's probably advanced analytics in many respects, very sophisticated modeling to really hone in how do we leverage renewable energy and all of its intermittency, pairing it with storage, optimizing transmission capabilities. Now with hydrogen, it's not just transmission capabilities, but also how do you convey molecules that you produce. And all of that is a lot of analytics and data science.
And the fact that you're in the electron world and the molecular world is important. Like you move molecules, you produce and use molecules, you make and move and use electrons. Hydrogen might be a way to bridge these things and let you leverage your assets in a very smart way. And so I think you'll be a sort of an innovative test bed. Maybe they'll show the model for the rest of the world. So it's very exciting to see how this all unfolds. And I can see as an electric utility, it'd be great to have consumers consuming electricity to make hydrogen, and you might be that consumer, and then use that hydrogen for our pipes or whatever it is for the things that are hard to electrify. So it's pretty exciting what you're doing.
You all probably know this very well, so I'm speaking probably to a converted audience, but I think many of us in the industry are really just starting to understand what green hydrogen can do. As you were alluding to, you can take green hydrogen and either combine it with nitrogen or combine it with CO2 that's been recaptured from somewhere else, reused, kind of in that circular economy that we were just talking about, and create the very fuels that are consumed today in a different format, in low or no carbon forms. So we can fertilize our crops with green ammonia. We can fly our jets on no or low carbon fuels going forward. We can power ships going across the ocean. I don't think we would have thought that that was possible in an economic way just a couple of years ago. And now I think we're on the precipice of it.
You know, like President Bush in the State of the Union speech 20 years ago, almost the day, talked about hydrogen and said that your child born today might drive a hydrogen car, talking about fuel cells. We've gone from fuel cells for cars all the way around, like, actually, that might be the worst use of hydrogen, to all these other applications which are higher value and harder to electrify. So I think that's a pretty exciting opportunity. Maybe just one more question before we go to the audience for questions. There is a lot of sort of thinking now that maybe we're less sensitive to decades ago in terms of like diversity of the workforce or the different issues related to our stakeholders, our consumers, our fence line communities around things like diversity, equity, inclusion. And I would say that the power sector is ahead of the oil and gas sector, but not really ahead of society yet on this. But clearly, there are women in leadership positions at your company and elsewhere. How are you thinking about diversity, equity, inclusion issues, or how does this come up in your world?
Yeah, I fundamentally and deeply believe that we are better off as a company, as an industry, as an economy, when we are more inclusive, that we have this diversity of thought, backgrounds, experiences, et cetera. And if you think about just what we've talked about, how rapidly changing things are in our industry, you will make better decisions if you have viewpoints that see things from different perspectives. If we all thought the same way, we would miss many of the turns that we've seen during this pathway. So I think it's incredibly important that we value that and we actively work to make sure that we incorporate those diverse voices. So this has been a primary focus of our company now for decades, of how do we make sure that we are an inclusive environment. We're constantly learning just like everybody else. It's great that we have examples like me and others that are from, that are either women or from diverse backgrounds, but we can always do more. For us, like having employee resource groups that really cultivate the development and investment and attraction of employees to our team, but also continue to invest in programs in the community, programs that make a difference in order to give people a better shot at creating opportunities and realizing opportunities like we have. So even we've moved forward a lot, even in the last couple of years, even though we've known that it's really important for us for decades.
That's great. And I'd say that there's a lot of evidence that teams with more diversity are more innovative, but more importantly, are more robust when it comes to when the times are tough. When times are tough, diverse teams make better decisions when there's a crisis on the line. So really great to hear that. But one other element you didn't mention, but as part of the company, is geographic diversity. You're in many states, and a mountainous rural region would be served differently or have different priorities, for example, than maybe an urban paved region or something. And having that diversity geographically, along with all the other dimensions of diversity, probably is useful. And I think an example, like in Texas, sometimes we think in Texas that we forget there's another part of the world beyond Texas, right? That's all that matters. And so it's good to get outside your bubble.
I moved here because of that, by the way.
Yeah. I keep leaving
there's got to be
Texas.
something good if you guys only see Texas.
We love Texas, but it's easy to get in the Texas bubble or whatever your bubble is and forget there's other perspectives. I had a student from Iceland a few years ago, and he had to explain to me that in Iceland they go swimming to warm up in the winter, which is like, no, in Texas you swim to cool down in the summer, right? So just little lessons like that can be useful. One more comment before we go to the audience with questions, or one more thing. You kind of hinted this when you're telling your story. Like, what are the skill sets or strategies for success you recommend for people here who might want to enter an energy career? You already mentioned flexibility is one, but what are some of the things in your mind that are important for them to have in mind as they consider these future directions?
So one thing that I've long thought, tried to articulate my views on leadership and what really differentiates, folks that are really wicked smart, really capable, but don't necessarily move forward versus those that do. Sometimes not even as wicked smart as others may be. And there was a book I read a couple years ago by Angela Duckworth called Grit, and she talks about passion and perseverance really differentiating people. And I can tell you, for me personally, and this was not what I highlighted in my personal story, I was not passionate about what I was doing for the first 10 years of my career. I was doing fine.
Like it was just a job or something like that?
It was just a job.
Yeah.
It was a great way to get a paycheck. I was intellectually stimulated. That's wonderful. But I wasn't passionate about it. And I was fortunate in that I truly became passionate about what we do. And that enables and kind of has a nice virtuous circle with perseverance. Like when things don't go well, kind of like what you highlighted with diverse communities. When things don't go well, perseverance makes a huge difference in whether or not you excel. And I think in our industry, there's lots of turns and twists. And so both passion and perseverance are critically important. I would think for our industry, though, you mentioned it, and I've now said the billion word a couple of times, and our market opportunity is $1 trillion worth of opportunity.
Or tens of trillions around the world.
Or tens of trillions.
Yeah.
So analytical capabilities,
Okay.
finance capabilities, the ability to communicate a vision, as you know, especially with things changing so rapidly, are all key skill sets that are important to cultivate and develop over time.
Yeah, so being numerate would be good, but there's more to it than that. You said you have to be able to communicate your vision. And that's important because I think there's so much emphasis on being numerate or quantitative, which is very valuable. We should do that. I'm an engineer. I love that. But these other skills of being able to deal with stakeholders or build diverse teams or be able to define and articulate a vision, I think would be very important as well. And then the spirit of don't give up and be flexible. In many ways, the energy world can't give up. You can't just like not show up to work on the weekend or whatever. Like it might not be you, but it's a 24/7 kind of business, really defined by grit, I would say. So
Absolutely.
I'm thinking your crews, when the hurricane hits, like they go out there in the worst weather to keep us
We have an
comfortable.
obligation to serve as a utility.
Yeah.
And so the folks that have a sense of duty and the vision of understanding what an impact we have on a day-to-day basis is really important.
I think we got hidden heroes of society. That's really
It
great.
really is.
So I think we got 11 minutes. We got time for a couple questions from the audience. Their hands up everywhere.
I love it. I didn't think this crew would be would
just
be
like
shy.
the point
That's
goes
awesome.
right. But it looks like there's a microphone in the back. Is that right? So we'll let you choose if you don't mind. So choose wisely and put the pressure on you.
Hi, thank you for your time. I'm Arno, first year MBA at Berkeley Haas. I'm from Europe, where offshore wind does play a big role in the clean energy development. What do you think offshore wind, what role do you think offshore wind can play in the US, especially when we know that a huge part of the population actually lives on the coast?
Yeah, offshore wind. What's the future prospects in the United States for offshore
So
wind?
we as a company, world's largest renewable company, are not investing in offshore wind. And I would say there's a big distinction in our minds between what the needs are and what the best options are for Europe versus the US. And in Europe, there aren't a lot of great options for renewable energy. So offshore wind makes a lot of sense given the opportunity set for deploying renewable energy and bringing down the carbon intensity of the grid. Here in the U.S., there are a lot of options, particularly in resource-rich areas like the middle part of the U.S., clearly the southern part, middle for wind, southern part for solar, and of course, increasingly as the costs have come down, that's been widely available across the board. What we've seen as an investor, and we're very pragmatic at the end of the day, we would love to decarbonize the world, but we also need to make sure that that makes sense from a financial perspective for the folks that are ultimately paying the bill. And many of the opportunities that we've seen in offshore wind, the returns are at best comparable, the financial returns are at best comparable with the opportunity set we have onshore, and the risks have been far greater. So a much longer permitting cycle, a much longer engineering construction cycle, much longer development and ultimately bringing this into fruition. That's before you start to operate it.
Corrosion, saltwater, wind,
So as a person that used to run our generating fleet, I'm very sensitive to those types of things and the complexities of operating the fleet long-term for an economic cost. So in the U.S., the balance of risk and reward has not been appropriate. So never say never for us. We will always continue looking at it. There are parts of the country that probably make more sense than others. And from an investment standpoint, we'll also work to help bring those electrons that do ultimately get built all the way to the shore and into the grid. So we're looking at participating in offshore transmission to bring offshore wind onto the grid and integrate it effectively.
And I was at ENGIE in Paris, France, when ENGIE launched Ocean Winds, this partnership to do offshore wind. Makes great sense off the coast of Portugal, off the coast of France, off the coast of Japan. Not as obvious. In the Gulf of Mexico, it's very cheap to build offshore wind, maybe cheaper there than anywhere in the world. But onshore wind's even cheaper, right? It's just easier to build onshore. Although maybe off the coast of Massachusetts or California where it's hard to build, I guess I can see that. And then you just lay 50 miles of subsea cables instead of 500 miles of overland cable. So as you said, there might be a few pockets for the U.S.
Yep.
But the U.S., we've got a lot of cheap, flat, windy land. So it's kind of easy to do it onshore. Great question. We're going to let our microphone runner pick one.
Oh, the pressure.
And not, okay. All right, we're going to the middle
Thank
of this.
you.
This is excellent.
Hi, I'm Amelia. I'm at Duke. I'm at Fuqua, and I'll be joining NextEra this summer, along with several other people in the audience here. So super excited to meet you.
Was this like?
I love it.
Well done. Yeah.
My question is kind of what challenges do you anticipate in 3Xing the company, and kind of how are you planning to overcome those?
So I would love to synthesize that to a very short answer, but we have a whole company-wide exercise ongoing right now to ask every part of our business, what would it take to 3X? And the answers are going to vary very differently between those businesses. Some of them are really obvious. So if you're going to go from 8 gigawatts of renewables in a given year to 20 or 24 if you're tripling it, and keeping me honest on math, there's a lot of early renewables, identification of land, getting interconnection queue positions, starting to do the permitting, continuing on and develop through the organization. You need skills and capabilities to manage a massive pipeline like that are different than when you're doing or competing against someone who's doing 100 megawatts or 200 megawatts a year. That's like an example of functionally things that we need to think about differently. But there's a lot of organizational aspects that we need to think about differently. Ensuring that we're collaborating across our whole organization, that we can make decisions faster than we make decisions today without compromising the quality of those decisions, knowing that we've got long-lived assets that are going to last 35, 40, hopefully even longer number of years. So it is a big thought exercise and a big challenge that creates a huge amount of opportunities for all of our team members, all of you who we want to be our team members, to help us figure out.
I mean, recruiting and retaining talent is probably one of the problems as a part of that suite of problems.
Yep.
I do that.
That's why I'm here.
That's right here. I love it. Great. I think, are there questions up there as well on our microphone? Any questions? Okay, and the rafters are silent. Okay, maybe we'll come back down somewhere here, maybe on the far side. We don't want to discriminate against this side.
How you doing? My name is Julian Smith. I'm a second year at Emory. And I'm curious, I think something of 20 to 30% of the U.S. lives in deregulated electricity markets, and price-sensitive commercial industrial players take advantage of this with their retail electricity providers, but residential participation is very low. So I'm super curious what you think of like the main levers to pull to increase residential participation in those markets and drive kind of energy consumption for everyday people.
How do we get more people to participate in the energy markets? I think that's a great question. I think the answer is going to be different, kind of like the way that you premised the question. Different in a market like Texas, which is ERCOT predominantly, versus a market that's fully rate regulated and fully integrated. So I'll contrast those two. So in ERCOT, there's great market mechanisms to incentivize that type of participation. One, there are folks that are already getting retail rates from a competitive energy provider. They can now look on their phone, see what their current price is, see what their own consumption is, see if they're getting the best deal in the market. So I think there's an active level of participation available for those that want to. The types of things that we're looking at, along with other companies, is think about how do we aggregate their consumption and aggregate the resources that they may have, like rooftop solar or a battery that's in their car, in their garage, to aggregate them together to provide a market resource. So one of the things that ERCOT is thinking about now is creating a market that rewards people for being available. So not a capacity market, but something that looks a little bit like a capacity market. You could aggregate home resources with the solar on the rooftop, the battery in the garage, to participate in that market and be another flexible load or flexible source of generation. And I think that's really exciting about creating the electric grid of the future. In a fully regulated market, it is a little bit harder, but I think all of us as utilities are starting to think more creatively than we used to before. Thinking about how do you have retail rates to encourage solar penetration. Think about how do you encourage the adoption of electric vehicles and providing those batteries as a resource to the grid. So I think as we've gotten to be a more creative and innovative industry overall, some of us a little bit faster than others, you're starting to see those innovations take hold, and I think we're going to accelerate over time.
And probably for you, from your perspective, a kilowatt of demand turned off is about as good as a kilowatt of supply turned on. And it should be much cheaper. I don't know, it's $1,000 a kilowatt to build a power plant, but maybe just a couple $100 per kilowatt to set up a demand response. So getting those market signals set up could save us all a lot of money. Which
could definitely help a lot.
Yeah.
And then as a duty to serve and an obligation to run a market, you still need those longer periods of time. And so you still need that thoughtful planning and anticipation of how your market is changing, how your generation sources are changing, how your transmission grid needs to change. So both of those need to be a focus of companies and
you have to balance
market
it
participants.
sub-second, but plan for decades and centuries, which is remarkable sort of tension. One last question before we're out of time. All the pressure's on you to pick wisely. Okay, well done. You chose the right question.
I feel really lucky, sorry. Hi, Nikki Beitmiller from Rice Jones School of Business. So you mentioned green hydrogen a couple of times. This has been an area of great personal and professional interest for me, and I think one of the things I've been following in detail is the hydrogen hub kind of regional, the earmarking and IRA legislation. There was a Wall Street Journal article a couple weeks ago about companies fighting over the definition of green hydrogen. Both OEMs, developers, kind of everyone across the
They're
value
also
chain.
fighting over the word hub.
Exactly right, yeah. So I'm just curious if you could comment a little bit on how the tensions that you're seeing as we navigate a new kind of public-private partnership model as a result of this legislation, and what NextEra is kind of their outlook on this. Thanks.
Yeah, so the IRA spawned a whole bunch of, initiated some really fantastic opportunities for the industry, but they left a lot to be interpreted. So there's a lot of things that they tossed over to the Treasury Department to write the actual definition and implementation rules. One of them, or several of them, and one in particular that's really impactful for the evolution and the takeoff or lack thereof on green hydrogen, is around what do you need in terms of matching the renewables into the consumption of the electrolyzer in order to get the production tax credit. And we are advocating very strongly, and I think that's the article I was quoted in, saying that if you don't have annual matching, you are going to have such a high-cost green hydrogen product, a green hydrogen molecule, that you will have almost no demand. You're going to be far more expensive than blue hydrogen. You're going to be far, far more expensive than gray hydrogen. And there will be some folks that have a willingness to pay, but not very many. And if what you need, which I strongly believe we do, in order to truly have a green hydrogen or hydrogen economy, whatever color you get, including pink, or I guess turquoise when you and I were talking about paralysis. In order to get to that, you need adoption so that you can bring the cost down. A huge pathway to getting costs down is getting manufacturing scale of the electrolyzer and incentivizing enough R&D that you continue to get the innovation to bring the cost down. So if you don't have any adoption, you don't get scale, and you don't have innovation that will ultimately bring this together. So we are strongly advocating to the Treasury Department and a wide variety of stakeholders across the DOE, the White House, a whole bunch of other venues to ensure that we get the right policy, or we will have no green hydrogen economy.
And it might, if it's done the wrong way, encourage a lot of dirtier coal plants to stay online. So it might be more expensive and dirtier if done the wrong way. But there's almost like a whole cottage industry, people just weighing in on this.
Yes.
So Treasury Department will decide maybe within a few weeks, actually. We'll see, I guess, a few more months, but we don't know. But that'll be a big decision for sure for you and for all of us. Great question, great audience. Really appreciate all the attention.
Love the engagement.
Really
Thank you,
loved hearing from you and your story.
You.
I think it's a great example and inspiration for everyone, and appreciate you making the time to speak with us. So
Happy
please join me and thank you, Rebecca. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we get up and go.
All right, we are going to start wrapping up programming tonight. I've got a few reminders I want to provide. Please keep in mind tomorrow's an early start. Breakfast is 7:30 to 8:30, very early, with programming starting at 8:30 back here in Crum. As we kind of tried to do tonight, we're not going to let people into the auditorium if there's a session going on, so please make sure that you're here promptly and that you can come in and enjoy all of our great speakers in the morning. We are also keep in mind that we're striving to have this be a zero waste event. There are a few ways that you can help with this. The first is please bring your own water bottles back again tomorrow. That way we don't have to use a bunch of cups. And finally, Please make sure that you compost appropriately. We have staff by the compost bins who are going to help you to determine what should go where, and that can go a long way. One more reminder before dinner. If you're attending the project finance workshop tomorrow, please make sure you bring your laptop. If you don't, I'm told that Alex is going to make you calculate tax equity IRR on the whiteboard in front of the class, which is only a joke for this room. We're very excited to have Maudie's Tex-Mex here tonight give you all a real taste of Austin. There are buffet lines located on the first floor and the second floor. At check-in, you receive drink tickets also in your tote bag, unless you've brought them to the regift table by now. The red drink tickets are for tonight, white are for tomorrow night. You can thank regulation for that. If you have dietary restrictions, there is a special buffet station by Moon Tower Cafe, which is kind of on the other side of the building on this floor, which means if you do not have dietary restrictions, please hold off from using that space until you know that everybody's been fed, because we want to make sure that those people get the right meals. There's plenty of seating on the first floor, on the second floor, if you're up to it, outside. I encourage you to sit at a table with new people. One of the things that made us want to apply to this last year was how many people we met and how many similar-minded MBAs we met. So please reach out, meet new people. And as always, if you need anything, find somebody from McCombs. We're all here to help. Everybody have a fun and safe night, and we'll see you bright and early tomorrow morning. Thanks so much.